tuning in. Hi, and welcome to Talkward. I'm Marty Dundix, editor-in-chief of Weekly Humorist magazine, and this is Talkward, a fun little podcast where professionally funny people come to tell awkward and cringeworthy stories. I'm very excited about today's show. We have a writing team on. They are writers for Weekly Humorist, also McSweeney's, also Points and Case, many places, Crack the Spine. The list goes on and on. Michael Bleicher and Andy Newton, welcome to Talkward.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Hey.
Michael's calling in from Washington, D.C.
And boy, are my arms tired.
It's hilarious. The book that you have out is called From the Campaign Trail or Thereabouts, and it is the first book from Humorist Books, the imprint of Weekly Humorist, and I'm so happy to publish your book. It's been a fun experience.
Thank you.
We're going to talk all about the experience of publishing a book and what we've learned and what we're hoping will happen and the major impact your book is having already on the scene, and what the process was to write a book, going from writing short online humor pieces to a much larger project, writing a novel, which just seems like such a daunting task. And so from the campaign trailer Thereabouts, it is out now. People should go buy it. You guys met early on in college. You guys went to Brown together.
Yes.
So welcome to the show. Mm-hmm. Let's start chatting about it all.
So we've been writing together for about 10 years almost. Is that right, Michael?
Yeah, 9 years, I think.
Yeah, 9 and change.
Fall 2010. What year is it now? 2019.
Yeah,
yeah.
we met through
9 years.
Yeah, we met through mutual friends at senior year of Brown, and immediately sort of hit it off, realizing that we had a lot of similar tastes and similar senses of humor, similar tastes in television shows and movies, and we sort of spoke a similar language of Seinfeld and Arrested Development references. And Michael was working on this, happened to be working on this show for the Brown television station. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I had sort of co-created this live, weekly, daily show type program for the Brown campus TV station that was horrible. And everybody else who was working on it had no sense of humor. There was sort of all people who just wanted to do something related to TV and didn't have any idea really how to entertain people or what it would be like to be funny.
Yeah, my sense of it was that it was like it was a bunch of people trying to build a reel for job applications, and then the two of us.
Right, that was exactly it. And I kind of thought, well, I didn't want to stop doing it. I just wanted it to be, vaguely enjoyable. And so, as I sort of divined that Andy and I both had a similar sense of humor, and we both kind of thought like in similar terms. For example, an early conversation we had was, well, if you're a fetishist, like if you're into poop sex, how do you bring that up if you're on like a first date? Do you just say like, so after this we could, go back to my place and watch Lost in Translation, or I could poop on your chest? I've already seen Lost in Translation, so,
Really balls in your court there.
Just throwing some stuff out there, no particular order for these things.
I'm watching it again, but I'm kind of a new experiences guy. Anyway, so, we both thought that was an interesting line of thought to pursue on a television show. And so I asked, well, do you want to write this together? And we wrote a bunch of jokes about
so
things that were in the news at the time. And
it was basically like the first. It's basically like the monologue section of the episode, like the first 5 to 10 minutes, where they're just kind of running through the headlines of the week, trying to center it mostly on campus-related news.
And I brought that as the like executive producer of this little thing to the anchors who were going to be doing it, and they looked at it and they refused to do any of the jokes because they were offended by them. I said, well, Andy wrote all of those. I didn't even see them until just now. I'm offended too, but we don't have another script, so maybe we want to use these jokes. But what happened was that after a couple of episodes, we sort of realized that it wasn't going to work because of the nature of how we were doing this whole thing on a shoestring to come up with really, really timely jokes that could then be delivered the way we wanted them to be delivered. So instead we would make the show about people trying and failing to put on a half decent show,
Yeah,
and we started to write more for character.
Yeah, we added a level of like metatextuality to it.
So the show is about a show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But no one else involved with the show got the memo. But
It's like, so the actors didn't realize that they were the ridiculous characters in the show.
No, we basically like after maybe I would say two or three episodes, we sort of got the sense of, we can make the anchors, we could create caricatures of these anchors, and like maybe they won't notice, and just sort of lean into the awkward delivery. Yeah, unless they're listening to it now.
The penny may still not have dropped. I mean, I don't know how often they go back and try to find them on YouTube.
A light bulb finally went off in their head.
Yeah.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah. No wonder they added so many stutters and ums in the script.
Well, there was one, this has nothing to do with your question, Marty, but there was one time when Andy he had class usually when the show was on, but one night he showed up to the taping, and one of the anchors was referring to the two people who wrote the scripts, and she mentioned my name, and then she said, and the other writer. And after her segment was done, we sort of said, "Oh yeah, you don't know Andy's name." And she said, "Oh no, I do. I just didn't know how he pronounced it."
It's like,
Newton? Which I thought was
Andy,
Andy, yeah,
Andy,
yeah. I don't even know where I was going with this, but the point being, we sort of developed this way of writing in character, and then the other thing we sort of figured out was that we both thought it was really funny to create these kind of magical realism versions of real people and real events. For example, you'd have, the campus, the university provost, for example, or the university president, and you'd start by using a real quote that they had said that was a little off or a little funny or had something you wanted to poke at, and then just go from there into a completely imagined version of them that might sort of dovetail with a satirical point you want to make, or might just go off in more of a farcical direction where it's the juxtaposition of something that is expected with something completely unexpected, and it's that goofiness that we delighted in.
And we loved blurring the lines between the official statements from the provost, say, and blurring the lines from the official statement he had in the Brown Daily Herald, the school newspaper, and then sort of expanding on it into this whole sort of veering off into this weird fictional direction.
It seems like a lot of the writing that you guys have done together since your beginnings have always been character-driven humor pieces, more developed than maybe a flat, typical short-form humor piece that you would read online, where it's a lot of lists. You know what I mean? It's a lot of like light premises.
Yeah,
it's a lot of like I mean, predictable, funny, but like light stuff that maybe And your stuff is always a lot more rich with dialogue and characters that have like a deeper, dumber silliness. And it's almost very like light-handed. Sometimes, like, it's not like your stuff is very subtle, I feel like, a lot of times when you read it. Like, people can read it and they say, oh, that's funny, but then they have to read it again and they're like, oh, I'm actually seeing some stuff that shows up in a lot of your writing. Like, you have themes that you sprinkle in themes that you like over and over again in your articles that I know because I publish them and I see them other places where you have themes that you repeat that you're just like, I think it's fun to find little Easter eggs that you guys find that are funny to you, that tickle you, that you plant in things that aren't necessarily needed, but you just always kind of have them. Yeah. And then in this book, from the campaign trail or thereabouts, on sale now, you have taken almost your entire career of writing and you've taken your favorite little Easter eggs and you've planted them in the chapters, kind of. You know what I mean? Like, so the characters for the book, Harold and Pattie, are... And Michael is running from the law, I feel like, right now. Hide behind that dumpster. They're on to you.
Mike Pence read the chapter from the RNC chapter.
In the book, and he's going to have me arrested because our libel laws are completely ridiculous and very unfair.
Yeah, there's a lot of real characters in this book that are satirized that I'm like, oh, am I going to get in trouble for that?
Right.
Maybe.
Well, it's, and that's
no, as a matter of fact, you are not. It is protected parody under Falwell versus Hustler, 1988, I believe.
Yep, very good.
Yeah,
it's good to have a lawyer writing the book, actually, too.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
By the way, if anybody, I am a lawyer, and if anybody's fallen off a motorcycle or, been hit by a truck or slipped, you can contact Marty and get my information.
Yep.
Michael Bleicher, Esquire.
I took Spanish for 1 year of college, as well as 4 years of high school, and I got a 5 on the AP test, so,
That's great.
Yeah, but back to your original point about writing from character, that is something that like you said, we really stumbled on almost immediately. That something that I think we were both naturally inclined to do, and then we really built on it from that show. 2536 was the name of it, and then through our own projects after we graduated, we had a blog. We had a small blog that was just the two of us at first, called Uncle Ron's Mobile Tampon Emporium. The name didn't really catch on.
Oh, really?
But we continued with the same sort of.
Should not buy tampons from Uncle Ron, people. No matter what discounts he promises.
We continued on a lot of those same themes. We had one of the articles that really stood out to me was we had a whole string of articles that were making fun of Barack Obama's campaign emails.
Yeah.
But we wrote, because they tried to make them as if they were. They tried to write them as if they were very personal.
Yeah. Like he's my buddy.
Yeah, and so that we had a string of articles where he was trying to invite the reader out to like a dinner party. He's like, I'm making my famous seafood risotto. Yeah. But writing it in that kind of traditional. Obama cadence, recognizable Obama cadence.
And then over time, they started to get even more detached, because it became clear that the addressee of the emails was actually a potential. Barack Obama wanted to woo this person, but in the way that like a man in 1910 would try to woo somebody. And so it would be this very sort of courtly, pleading, proper, but desperate yearning in the emails, which kind of matched the tenor of the fundraising emails.
Yeah.
And it got really weird. And it was the kind of thing that we wrote, were like, we thought this was funny, and we didn't really care if anybody else thought it was. Whereas I think if we had tried to go the route of like doing the listicles and stuff that actually got clicks, we might have hit more success earlier on, but we wouldn't have found a kind of team voice or team style that carried us through to the point where we would think writing a novel is something that we would be able to sustain.
Yeah, I think, we didn't really start trying to get published in places outside of our own websites and blogs until a few years after college. I would say maybe, just like within the last 5 years.
I think there's actually a connection between that and us both finally entering sort of serious adult relationships, where we kind of realized like other people seeing and appreciating you and doing certain things, for the world instead of just on your own in your room is kind of a great, that's a rewarding feeling.
Yeah.
This is a hot take I just came up with, but yeah, we were sort of, content to sort of amuse ourselves for a long time.
Yeah, and after Uncle Ron's, we started a website with a few other friends of ours from Brown and my brother, called The Brabble, and that was more of a the vision for that. It was more of a an e-magazine, or just I guess that was the terminology back then. I think now they would just call it a culture website or something. But
website
and that's where we really started. Right, Michael and I really started getting into writing these, monologues from different characters, and that's where we created what became the basis for Harold, the main character of our book. We had this at the time. He didn't have a name. He was just called the Foreign Correspondent.
Foreign Correspondent, yeah. I had woken up from a dream about a year into doing this website, and I just thought we should do a piece where there's a New York Times reporter who's supposed to be in Turkey covering the riots in Turkey, whatever exactly was going on there. But he's a coward, and he really likes nice things, so he's actually in Greece at a hotel, like on the beach in Crete, and his editor is calling him from Manhattan, and he's trying to lie and pretend that he's in Turkey, but he's not, and at the same time see if he can get his editors okay to be in Greece so that he can be doing all this on the up and up, which is a really complicated premise for like an 800-word humor piece written in the first person to an audience of like 20 people and sometimes my dad. But we did that, and we had so much fun with the voice that then we did a second and a third, and it became this recurring character from time to time. And I loved writing for him because he was really, really classist. He was a liar, a fraud, extremely duplicitous, and he just had no shame. And that's a delightful character if you're a humorist to write for, because literally any bad impulse you have, you can channel into this person and see where it goes. And literally everybody I know who's read the book tells me that they pretty much hate this character. And I'm always kind of shocked because I see him as being sort of partly repugnant, but also like wish fulfillment.
Yeah, there's also, I think, a lot of insecurity in a character like that, who's who's sort of so obsessed with the trappings of a certain identity, and obviously kind of reaching, for it.
There's a lot of imposter syndrome in there.
Yeah, and I find that really compelling. This sort of, this kind of like constant burning need inside of him, and never, and always sort of finding that his lofty expectations for how a certain life should be continually falling short.
Absolutely. And I think also we fleshed out this character as we were starting to write the novel, and we'll get to how we put him in the novel in a second, but at a time when we were both sort of leaving the academic world, academia, and actually trying to make our way at desk jobs and sort of hating it. And it became a vehicle, I think, for me, and I think also for Andy, to sort of channel our frustrations into how stupid that was, and completely. At the same time how stultifying and deadening it was, into this person who sort of also saw that and saw that it was this game, but decided he was just going to try to take shortcuts because, hopefully unlike us, he sort of narcissistically believed it was his birthright to just cut the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a terrible employee. Harold is such a bad reporter, but hearing the way that you guys write, you do a lot of a style that is a lot of similar to like a Bob Newhart, where it's one side of a conversation, and the comedy, comes from not hearing what the person is saying, but then the reaction to what your character is saying back to them, where he tries to float the idea of, oh, well, who's covering Greece right now because of so-and-so's termination? It's probably just, Russia and, what did he say?
They're practically on the same beat.
I assume Russia and Greece are practically on the same beat. Anyway, Greece is in the midst of a massive debt crisis, so he's like trying to steer the conversation after his editor has told him he's going to be getting the U.S. campaign trail.
Which is like probably the most coveted position he could get,
He's still trying to peddle himself as like, well, my question to you, sir, is who's covering Europe? It's like, and it's just in everything
he's looking for like that nexus between status and the actual amount of work he'd have to put into something,
Right.
So tell the listeners about the basic premise of the book. Who is Harold? Who is Pattie? And what are they up to? And what are they trying to achieve?
Yeah. So Harold is a reporter. Harold and Pattie are a married couple in their late 30s. Pattie is a writer, a TV critic for the New Yorker, and Harold writes for an unnamed Manhattan newspaper. And both of them are fairly, ivory towerish in their, but also like kind of, the sort of bleeding heart limousine liberal kind of mentality. And Harold is assigned to cover the 2016 presidential election, and immediately kind of devises this scheme that he can, save his, or rescue his marriage, which has been sort of on the rocks, by taking his wife with him on the campaign trail and expensing a vacation to San Diego, thinking like, well, once I'm out there, I'll have a ton of leeway in where I get to go and who I get to talk to. So we can just hop and skip over to, San Diego, and who's going to notice an extra Cobb salad on the expense reports? It's
Right.
Practically the motto of the journalism industry.
Exactly.
And so it's a bit of a road novel in the sense that, the Harold and Pattie are traveling around the country and, meeting politicians, going to political events, meeting voters. And so it really is, that sort of premise is also a vehicle for us to, explore the sort of recognizable figures from 2016, and also these what we see as the kind of archetypes of the American political discourse, and cultural mentality.
And this is a dysfunctional couple. He's terrible. She is great, right? So she is. When you're reading the book, I'm envisioning actors, and it would be a younger. Niles. It would be a younger
David Hyde Pierce.
Younger David Hyde Pierce.
That was sort of our point of reference.
Kind of a Frasier era David Hyde Pierce.
Yeah.
And then sort
absolutely.
of a early Seinfeld era Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Yeah, it's fair to say.
Somewhere between that and Tina Fey, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're gonna,
or rather, a little bit of Liz Lemon in there, sort of the emotionally repressed workaholic,
right,
who has other emotional needs, but she sort of refuses to recognize them because that would take more work than just sort of soldiering on with what she knows she can deal with.
Yeah, exactly. The kind of like the although Harold is a bit of a piece of shit, he's a familiar piece of shit,
right?
And so you know what you're getting. And it would be, probably too much work to go and try and do the requisite work on yourself in order to
have the strength or willpower to leave him and fight him through the divorce battle in which he wants more than half of everything, and then start over. And I kind of think of Pattie's attitude as thinking of all that and being like, oh man, then I'd have to make a dating app profile, and I'd have to get a studio and probably have to talk to my parents, and so she just sort of I'd
have to move to Chelsea.
Hard.
Can you imagine?
Which I think is a very true feeling that people who are people who would rather just stay in a bad relationship just because the alternative sounds so much more work.
Oh yeah,
and going through that is so difficult. So maybe we'll just fix this thing that maybe used to be good, and we'll kind of let it. But the more you read, the more you get mad at him, and the more you're mad at her, she's way too good for him.
And one of the things, we are writing a sequel now, and one of the things we started to pull back the covers on a little bit more is something that we talked about in coming up with the backstory for these characters, but only hinted at in fits and starts in this novel, because this one is pretty farcical for most of it, which is there's got to be something going on in Pattie's psyche and in Pattie's past that makes her do this. And so she is kind of codependent, and she, for whatever reason, as far as you can see in this book, is okay with always trying to bail Harold out or help him out, or give him, a little bit more assistance than he really deserves, and hope that somehow this time he'll make good on it and he'll be better and be the kind of person that she wants him to be. And he always lets her down each time.
Yeah, always. And the rental car companies.
Well, they really undersold the insurance.
Yeah. So funny. And there's so many things in the book that are... When you're reading the book is so much like watching a comedy road trip movie. So, a lot of books are written in a way where there's so much that would have to be done with an adaptation from a book to a movie that it would become incredibly difficult to, they couldn't really make that, so they're going to have to rewrite that, or they're going to have to do that a different way. But the way you guys write, it's almost like reading a fully developed script. And which is great because I love, I'm reading scripts is just fast, and watching movies is great. And this reads like a great movie. Mm-hmm. So I mean, when this gets made into a streaming project, it is going to be so much fun to watch because the adventures and the misadventures are so hilarious, and and the comedy is so quick-witted, it's so punchy, where it's almost like the dialogue is just like joke. Yeah. It's so fast, and the calamity he gets into, but then gets out of just as quick is very funny.
Yeah, and a lot of that is obviously by design. I think some of it is because that's the style that we developed over these years of writing these short pieces together. Is we love to rather than just like a lot of fiction does, sort of pull back the curtain and show the interior lives of the characters, point and hint at that interiority through their actions and dialogue and subtext. We also realized that for us to write the humor novel, the comic fiction that we wanted to write, it had to have that sort of breezy quality to it. And so, overburdening the book with description or interiority would have slowed it down, and I think detracted.
Yeah, it moves fast.
Yeah.
Like, it moves fast. Like, I was looking for a couple of lines of dialogue that kind of are the beginnings of the character. Just like the whole story kind of starts right out of the gate, and it's literally on page 2 is when the jokey dialogue and the whole story starts. Like, that's how fast you're in. Like, the beginning of the book is at this dinner party. Literally in the first 2 pages, you have Harold complaining about the cheapness of the dinner at the dinner party. Would it kill them to get lobsters? What is this? Newman's Own salad dressing? We can afford Newman's Own. Like, he was so mad at the fancy dinner party not being fancy enough.
And this is his friend throwing him a dinner.
And it's just like you got into it so quickly, which is so much fun with this book. Is like you got into the meat and potatoes of the characters immediately, and that's probably because you have been working on short form humor pieces where you're character and dialogue driven, which is different than most humor short form pieces. So like you get into the stuff so quickly because you're not used to having the time. Mm-hmm. Right, I don't think you guys write where you have like the luxury of pages upon pages of just like blah-de-blah. Right. You guys get into it so fast, which is a great training ground to write a really good novel because you don't get bored reading this book. You just like you start reading, you're like stuff's happening immediately.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
It's not like when's something going to happen.
I think of it more as most novels are sort of written more as though they are movies, and so you have time to set the scene and develop the characters and do exposition. And I think we sort of come both in terms of where our shared sensibilities as a team ground us and just stuff that we like more from kind of a sitcom perspective. So we looked at chapters, I would say, more as being individial episodes within an arc rather
billed
than
as
being
an episodic
scenes of
novel.
a movie.
Yeah.
So, and that, I think, served us well in that the end product, if you're going to have 300 pages that are humorous and there's not going to be a lot of interiority or you're not going to deal with heavy themes in a heavy way, you need to keep things moving along. Otherwise, it's going to start to tire on people before you've gotten to the end of it. And so having these structured, episodic fragments make up the whole, I think, was sort of the natural place that we gravitated to, and that came from wanting to write sitcoms rather than wanting to write movies.
It does, because like even the way that the individual chapters are structured, within the chapter there'll be like 4 different scenes where they're separated, and it's just like, and there's no need for expository more information. You just start reading and you know exactly where they are and what time it is, and what date it is. You're just like, boom, boom. Oh, they're here now. Mm-hmm. I didn't need someone to tell me. Yeah.
It's kind of a Hemingway-esque approach to writing satire rather than like a Henry James approach. And I think that just sort of naturally fit the characters and the scenes. There was never really even any discussion about should we have the narrator be able to peel back the curtain on what Harold's thinking or what Pattie's feeling. We just tried to give just enough dialogue, and we would actually edit and pore over certain lines of dialogue a lot to make sure there were enough clues there, but just tried to give enough with each thing that each character says or the couple of words we use to describe how the character is behaving when they're saying or doing things, to let a reader who's paying attention get the message of, okay, Harold's doing this because he's insecure, or Pattie's doing this because she wants something from Harold he can't give.
Yeah, and I think I remember noticing as I was reading that I liked that things weren't overly explained to me. Mm-hmm. Like, you did have to pay attention.
That was something we really...
And I liked it. I liked that I wasn't being reintroduced to the characters every chapter, which I feel like definitely happens in television shows where... Yeah. Every episode of a show that you've already watched the previous episode, they rehash the entire storyline. It's like every episode now is a pilot.
Yeah.
because they think the viewers are that stupid.
Right.
You know,
I think, and that's where I think our the inspiration we derived from television shows, diverges, and start. That's more of our literary influences. That's something we thought about too. Is this too, telly, not enough, showy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like to think about this is something that I think I've mentioned to both of you, off mic, that the Italian author Italo Calvino wrote this really great essay on the nature of postmodernism as an artistic movement, and how one of the aspects of it is that the artist isn't limited to just the sort of inflexibility of genre and medium and media that artists were before postmodernism. Something that I think artists now kind of take for granted. But he points out that he's as inspired by Manzoni or Dante or Boccaccio as he is by the Mickey Mouse comics that he read as a kid. And I think it's very much the same for us. I think we're both as inspired by Seinfeld and the Bob Newhart Show as we are by Mark Twain and Kurt Vonnegut.
You guys are so smart. I love talking to people who I love talking to people who are so much smarter than me, but at the same time, it also puts on display just how dumb I am. But it's fun to be exposed to it, because both of you are very educated and very well-read individuals who have now quoted Italian literature and Hemingway and was it James Joyce?
Henry James.
Henry James. Oh, sorry. Is it even a difference to me? Maybe not, guys. I don't know. I'm going to nod and smile and act like I know what's going on, but that's why it's so much fun working with people like you, because I just admire the ability for people to write and be so good at it and so smart and have all of that knowledge. So the book, well, the one thing that I wanted to talk, quickly we could just talk about one of my favorite scenes, and one of my favorite scenes is when they take the Uber and they get themselves into some trouble. Harold and Pattie, I think, are in Boston at this time.
Yeah.
And they get into an Uber, and they get into a situation with the Uber driver. It's a cab or an Uber driver?
It's a cab.
It's a cab. So he's in a cab in Boston, and he has a very chatty cabbie. So tell us about that scene, and then tell us where that scene came from.
Michael, you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll take this. So first I'll briefly summarize the scene. They're in the back of this cab, and the driver starts talking, and it becomes clear that he's sort of a racist, misogynistic lowlife who's got some friends who are probably kind of third-tier criminals running drugs and sort of on a petty local level. And Harold, being, in addition to very self-important and class-conscious, is also a complete coward. And so whenever he does encounter sort of tough blue-collar people, he completely withers. And this guy, through a series of communications, seems to think that Harold and Pattie are in Boston to party, and he offers to hook them up with some oxys, some painkillers. And this is while Harold's paying for the cab at the end of the ride. And Harold is too terrified to say no, and you sort of intuit that he also thinks this is a demand and not an offer, which may not be off base. So he agrees to buy $500 worth of prescription painkillers from this cab driver, which he's then saddled with. He refuses to throw them out at the hotel because they're staying at the Fairmont, and he just doesn't think that would be the right place to throw them away.
Hotel's far too nice to
Yeah, you can't do that. He's afraid of what the hotel would think of him, I think, if they found it in his trash. So they take him with them until they can get into New Hampshire, where they can throw them away in their natural habitat. And before they're able to do so, they're pulled over because Harold's rented his second sports car of the novel. We're in chapter 4. And it's February. He crashes on some black ice. The police come. They search the car because they think he's been beating his wife, which he hasn't. Last thing he would ever do. But they find the oxys. Harold gets arrested, and he ends up in jail in New Hampshire. But he's released in the morning because it turns out he bought off-brand Tylenol from the cabinet.
And the whole thing is so funny, and the whole thing happens, and there's tons of jokes and hilarious dialogue because of it. And then at the end, resolution, he gets out. Right. So it was such a funny. It was a funny part. It was a funny scene because all of it, all the hilariousness that happens, and then there's no consequences, and then the story just continues. And I feel like that's the fun thing that happens in this book is there's tons of these fun things happen, and it just keeps going. You know, like you find hilarious ways into it and then out of it, which is like this great. It's like a roller coaster of kind of a comedic novel, which I think is, and you keep the kind of momentum from the beginning to the end. Like this is a daunting thing to write a novel that you guys have done, and it doesn't like peak and then go down. It's like consistently funny, until the end, and then it's over, and then you and then you want more, which is why when you guys said you're writing a sequel, obviously you can write a sequel because this book ends in such a way that you can have a sequel. Oh yeah, these characters can continue on. Not to ruin anything, no one explodes.
Well, and nobody changes and nobody learns. You can pick up exactly where you.
Most importantly, no one learns a lesson.
I think what I love about that, one of the things I love about Harold, and I think that chapter in particular illustrates it, is that he's a very impotent character. You know, he things kind of just happen to him, and he just react, and all of his action in the book is very much just. Him being reactive.
Yeah, he's very reactive.
And so whenever he succeeds, it's always just falling ass backwards in success. And then he also finds himself in all these situations where he feels like he's up against a wall, but really it's just like he's just acting. He
has really, no agency, or he refuses to exercise it.
And
so
it's
he
this
just
sort of
ends up,
and it's this kind of situation where he feels compelled to do something, but it's really. All in his own head, or because he's either afraid or he thinks it would be impolite, and I find that hilarious when people are sort of forced to do things because of some kind of sense of propriety or etiquette or...
Yeah, a lot of what Harold does is because he wants people to think that he is better than he is. And that whole, like his personality, like he wants to be this upper crust, he wants to be this high society, important, writer, from a good family, and wouldn't be caught dead wearing that kind of, clothing, or vacationing in that kind of spot, or, wearing white after Labor Day, or any of those things. What would the neighbors think? And it's like the amount that he goes through to avoid being thought of poorly ends up him in situations that are so terrible because he did that to begin with. You know, like he's like lighting the fuse to his own demise over and over and over again. You're just like, God, if this guy just stayed in bed, he would be fine.
He sort of lights the dynamite and then sticks it in his back pocket, thinking I'm going to need this later.
It's like, did I light that? Did I forget?
The backstory to the cabbie thing, by the way, because you asked, is a lot earlier, but I wanted to tell it. I get Uber drivers often who share things with me that are really strange, and also other types of people. And so that cab driver was based on, I was over at my then girlfriend's apartment, and now fiance, and there was something wrong with her toilet. It was like 3 days before Christmas. We could find one plumber who was available on short notice at that time of year to come over. He comes over, he spends about 20 minutes doing something that seems to involve taking the entire toilet apart and just cursing up a storm. He comes out to write up the invoice, and just casually talking, he mentions how he has 2 daughters and he loves them, and his wife won't let him see them, but he loves them. He's a great dad. He just can't see his girls. And he says, he's changed a lot over the years. When he was young, he had a real bad temper, and one time he killed a kid. And my girlfriend and I looked at each other, and we were like, okay, you run to the door, I'll run to the balcony.
Have 911 ready on speed.
And he goes, I was at this bar, and this kid made me real angry, so I slammed him against the bar. And my buddies were on the police force, and they told me, you got to get out of town, the kid's dead. And then he must have looked up and seen our faces, and he said, but the story's got a happy ending, because the kid... his heart stopped on the operating table, but they got it started again. And I don't do that kind of thing no more. And we were like, happy holidays.
Great ending.
Really saved it in the end there.
Yeah. And then the other the other
5 stars
aspect that we wove into the cab driver was on a separate occasion. My fiance was in an Uber on the way to the airport, and after not speaking to her driver the entire time, he looked in the rearview mirror and said to her, "You know, for it to be first-degree murder, I'd have to have intent."
Oh my God,
that's frightening.
And so we just kind of wove those together into one character for this taxi driver. And then I remembered that when I was in college once, some cab driver drove me to the airport, and he mentioned, you know, if you need any bikes or anything, just hit me up. Here's my card. And I was 18. I didn't even know what bikes were until I got halfway through security. I was like, oh, okay. And my first reaction, kind of like Harold, because I was an insecure teenager, was, well, he must have thought I was really cool.
Very cool.
You know, he was offering to sell me drugs. Nobody's ever offered to sell me drugs. So that kind of all wove together. And we did that a lot in a novel where we would take real people or real events that had happened to us, and we would either fictionalize them a little bit or just drop them in exactly how they happened into the book. And that's a lot of the texture and color, I think, that comes through in the travelogue portions of the novel, that these are not, by and large, people that we've made up that represent two kind of sheltered white guys from the Bay Area's idea of what middle America are like. These are random encounters that we've actually had, that we've just sort of observed and remembered kind of as reporters, and then found a way to weave into this fictionalized space.
Yeah, we really wanted to capture the, the profound weirdness of America as we saw it. And so a lot of that comes from these little anecdotes here and there that we...
And we talked about this a little bit before. You guys put a lot of these anecdotes into this book, years and years of anecdotes. Mm-hmm. And now you got to write another book. Yeah. And are you out of them? And now are you worried about that?
Not out completely. I think we were actually just writing last week, and I think Michael put in something that an old professor of ours said to him once. But it is sort of, I think it's David Crosby who has said something like, you have your, when you're writing your first album, you have your whole life up to that point to write it. And then your next album you have to write in like a year.
Yeah. Hope that year is full of inspiration.
Yeah. So I think the next book, just to peel back the curtain a little bit, it might have fewer of those anecdotes in them, but I think it'll be a lot more heavily plotted, because I think a lot of the lessons that we learned about telling a story on the scale of a novel while we were writing the first book, I think we're now applying to the sequel.
When we were starting to come up with the first book, I remember when we were first discussing that, my big concern was, how are we going to do something that sustains people's interest for the length of a book? Because we've only written short humor pieces. And so, we don't want to write, if we want to write a novel and not just like a big collection of short to medium length pieces, what are we going to do that's actually going to sustain a plot that's sort of a strong enough backbone to do that? And I remembered this character, and I thought he would work because he's a reporter and stuff like that. And I forget where I'm going with this exactly, but
I thought you forgot where you were going, like physically walking somewhere right now. Oh, what room am I in?
No, I did actually have to go in.
Am I in the laundry room?
Outside, and then I live next door to someone who's yelled at me a few times for playing Sergeant Pepper too loudly, so I had to go inside because she just went outside and she can see me, and she glared at me, and I'm not that confrontational.
How dare you exist in your own home?
Yeah.
Too much Sergeant Pepper.
She knocked on my door while Mr. Kite was, being for the benefit of Mr. Kite, was playing very loudly, and she said, "Would you mind turning down your jams? It's 10 o'clock on a Sunday night." And I did, but I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah. I should say about the point you were making. Oh no, I forgot where I was going to go.
I think we were talking about character. The first book, when we were plotting the first book, we had only been doing these short pieces. And so the way we sort of came up with the original structure of the plot was that we would have like a bunch of manageable sized different episodes, not just because that's sort of a nice breezy structure for a humor book, but also because that's a way, if you've only written short things, to kind of pare it down to manageable chunks. And then the character is the constant thread. But I think this time, because we've already got the experience of writing for this character and we've developed him and his wife and his world more, we wanted to make it more plot driven. And even though there will still be different episodes in it, it doesn't have to be so much like a sitcom where each chapter is sort of a different episode, and then at the end of the episode, everything is, back to status quo. Lucy snuck into the show, and Ricky caught her, and she came back home, and the Mertzes found the money under the couch, and everything's good.
I remember what I was going to say now too. Another thing I think we realized pretty early on while we were brainstorming the book is that, because we started writing it maybe a month or two after the 2016 election. So a lot of that campaign was, still pretty fresh in our minds. We realized that, a campaign cycle already kind of has a built-in, natural narrative arc to it. And so if, we realized, we're writing a book about the 2016 election, we could just use that as the sort of basic frame for the book and just sort of hang our little stories from it, like a mobile or something. And now that, the next book won't take place during an election, it'll take place, during the Trump presidency. So there's not that sort of natural built-in story to it already. So we're sort of filling in some of that ourselves and building in the through lines that came naturally to the first book.
And also since then, we have now both read Anna Karenina, and so I think we kind of want to do something on that scale.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That sounds easily marketable.
Sure. Yeah. So, what quick lessons have you learned from tackling such a big thing fresh out of the gate? For your first book, writing a novel, and you're writing the second novel, what are your top three things that you've learned that you can apply to the next book? What about character development, writing dialogue, story arcs, planning ahead for the entire, maintaining momentum? What have you learned from this book that for the next book you're ready to go with? What big lessons have you learned from this book, and what lessons can you tell to hopeful potential authors out there listening who want to write a novel? What did you learn, and what advice can you give?
So I think the thing that jumps to my mind is, something that I think a lesson I had to learn a few times through the course of writing this book and revising it is not to be too precious with your own writing. That I think, there's sort of I think a lot of writers sort of have this tendency to I could just be like Kerouac and just drop a bunch of amphetamines and write the whole book and then it'll be done, but, in reality, it's a very long process. And if you want, there's, don't be too attached to the words that you wrote the first time around, or even the second time around, third, et cetera. Just, there's always, you can always sort of, go back and unpack things and put them back together again. And you can always maybe find a funnier line or a more elegant way of saying something.
Yeah, that's a great one that I echo. Building on that in a way, I, at first, when we were outlining the book, was really into trying to sort of come up with what details I thought would be funny, and even lines of dialogue for a situation that I thought would be funny. And those were they were kind of helpful in the brainstorming process to give me, and I'm not sure if Andy was better about this than me, but maybe Andy, you felt this way too, but I felt they helped during brainstorming to give me some sense, a few more, micro markers of what kind of a scene this would be, but not to be attached to that at all when we actually came to write. And I found that the value of outlining and brainstorming was much more at just the very macro level to say, what kind of map is this? And then a lot of the funniest lines and details were really things that didn't come to me or come to Andy, I think, until we were actually just in the moment of writing and not thinking about any, grand design or not deliberately plotting, okay, this shall be funny, that shall be funny, and sort of more creating moments where you can write without thinking about the fact that you're writing.
Yeah, I think.
And I liken it kind of to like jazz improvisation. A good jazz tune to improvise on is one that just has a good chord structure and a good head. And then you take it from there when you're in the moment. And I tried to approach the second book more like that because it's what I was most proud of during the first book, as opposed to, say, writing like a Brian Wilson style pop song where you've got, 20 chord changes and 10 voices arranged for, 6-part harmonies and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think something I realized too, building on that, is that, we would come up with all of these very specific details in the outlining process and then realize by the time that we got to that point in the actual writing of it that it no longer really fit. That I was sort of surprised by how much the little lines of dialogue and little details here and there can, sort of collectively steer the story in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really sort of overburdening an outline with details can kind of it's not a problem, but it becomes like, well, this no longer really works with where we are now.
And you guys worked remotely together using like Google Docs and things like that.
Using Google Docs, parentheses, trademark, close parentheses.
Yeah. If Google would like to hire us for commercials, we've talked about how we really cannot stress enough how much we love Google Docs. I don't think I don't think we would be able to do what we did without it. Because Michael lives in DC, I live in New York, so we schedule times to sit down and write together, and we can use the really helpful chat window that Google Docs has to sort of, discuss things while we were writing.
But we also used it when we lived in the same town in Providence, because it lent itself, I think, to that weird combination of solitariness of writing and collaborativeness of doing comedy writing with a team. And I don't think we'd come up with a lot of this stuff if we sat in the same room and like took it in turns to type on the keyboard while the other person suggested things.
No, I mean, to your jazz metaphor, it is very like the improvisational aspect of how we write and sort of yes and each other and build off of each other. Yeah. That we couldn't do if only one of us had control of the keyboard at once. I think.
No, yeah.
And you get that reaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times writing is such a solitary thing. People do it alone in their house on a computer, and you don't have that immediate gratification that you get from doing something on stage or doing live comedy.
Yeah.
So you don't know when a joke lands perfectly until maybe it's too late. Like you've written a book and then you're like, oh, that wasn't as funny as I thought it was, but maybe it would have been funny if you had changed the line just a little bit and...
Yeah.
Your co-author could have seen it in the Google Doc, like, oh, that's a great line, but if you just change that one word, now it's really funny.
Yeah, there's a built-in sounding board.
Yeah.
And I've wondered sometimes how many revisions do we, avoid because we catch things in real time because there are two people looking at it, and we'll be writing something and I'll have a line and Andy will change a couple of keywords or vice versa, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, okay, now that works. Whereas otherwise, that joke might have sort of languished through 3 or 4 revisions before somebody finally said, this is the reason this sequence isn't working. Like, this wording is just not funny.
Yeah.
Or what have you. And also, Marty, playing to your point about having an audience, some of the most gratifying stuff when we're writing the first draft is when either of us comes up with a line that makes the other person laugh in real time while we're coming up with it. And that's this kind of more performative aspect to writing that definitely isn't there if you're doing something solitary. And I think that's a big reason why we've always worked in real time. A lot of people I sound like Trump. 2 people have asked me, do you write always at the same time, or do you like divide it up and, you'll write this section, I'll write that section, and we always write in real time.
It's good. So you can see the cursor moving in the other person's window. That's exciting.
Yeah. I can't stress this enough. It's a lot like how Lennon and McCartney wrote songs.
Or as your favorite people,
Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel.
That's different because
who are
Garfunkel
omnipresent
did not
in
write
all
the
of your
song.
writing.
Yeah.
You have such a thing about specifically Art Garfunkel.
Yeah.
He's in many of your articles.
Yeah, and is a recurring character in this
the
book
books.
too.
And he's been dedicated. You dedicated the book to him.
Yeah, well,
The book is dedicated.
yeah. So we started writing what we eventually started calling the Garfunkel monologues in the Brabble days, back when we were writing that website. And it's a character that we just sort of it started as just a one-off piece, and then we just kept writing from because we just thought it was so funny. And you talked earlier at the beginning of the episode about how you keep finding these similar themes. Garfunkel, I think, really those Garfunkel pieces, I think, really capture a lot of the themes that we gravitate towards of the kind of vacuous nature of celebrity and that kind of thing. And so when we came to writing the novel, we're like, well, we have to put him in there.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a shame not to, especially if this ends up being the only book we write.
And he gets, it's funny because you're making fun of him for not being the famous one, obviously, in the duo. But then the amount of screen time he gets in this book, you've made him more of a famous version of himself in this book.
Yeah.
Like, you've made him more politically relevant
Yeah.
in this book than he is in real life.
Yeah, the character is he's we sort of his role in the book we sort of based off of Susan Sarandon. During the 2016 election, she was the sort of celebrity campaign surrogate for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
And we just thought that was so. It's something that only Democrats do, partly because there aren't a lot of Republican celebrities.
Yeah,
but
the Republicans get like Clint Eastwood talking to a chair.
Right,
like, that's all they
exactly.
get.
Or like Chuck Norris.
Right.
And it's like
Scott Baio.
just
Like,
embarrassing people.
they get Kid Rock.
Yeah.
Like, they get ridiculous
They have
people.
the worst celebrities. But like I think the Democrats, for their part, over rely on the power of celebrity.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? Like, why am I
Why
listening
am I
to this
voting for
person's
this person? Because
expertise?
Tom fucking Cruise told me to vote for him.
Right.
But George Clooney is really dreamy, so obviously I do want to listen to what he has
Well,
to
Alec
say.
Baldwin, he's an American treasure.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, so our Garfunkel kind of plays that role of being a celebrity campaign surrogate and appearing on MSNBC and CNN and that kind of thing. And,
Which now I want to see. I want him to be like a pundit.
that would be great.
Great.
I
But
would
joined
love,
here
and
with
as I understand, he's not busy writing songs. So I would think
joined
there
here
would
with
be
Chris
time.
Hayes and Art Garfunkel.
Yeah.
We're here to
We
talk
also-
about political strategy.
As long as we're mentioning celebrities, I do want to point out that Chris Hayes also makes an appearance in the novel as the ex-boyfriend of the female hero, the heroine, as you would say. And he'll come back in the sequel as well. And our take on Chris Hayes is pretty much this guy fucks.
He's got books. Yeah, he seems kind of like, yeah. And Harold is very jealous. Very
Harold's
jealous.
very jealous of Chris Hayes. Chris Hayes kind of represents a lot of what Harold wants. He has, his own program. He's a celebrity. He's obviously well off. He has a full head of hair. He seems more comfortable in his own skin. And Chris Hayes is kind of like the counterpoint to who Harold actually is. And I mentioned him as an example of how we sort of bring in real people and then just sort of fictionalize them with abandon to suit the needs of the world that we created.
Yeah, I would say that Chris Hayes is the real life Chris Hayes is a much better reporter than our version of Chris Hayes, because I think we used Chris Hayes also as a way to satirize a lot of the shortcomings that we see in cable news and sort of chasing this kind of business of chasing memes and chasing hashtags instead of chasing stories.
Yeah.
And so I don't think the real life Chris Hayes really does that. He is on Twitter a lot, though. Maybe you should put down the phone, Chris. But
I mean, you're not wrong. Everything is a over sensationalized hashtag story these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not incorrect at all. Your criticisms are spot on, as they are the entire time in this book.
Thank you.
As a impartial observer. The next book. Do you have a title for the next book?
Not yet.
Ooh.
I think we don't have a title. I would very much like to call it The Carlyles, in keeping with the kind of Anna Karenina thing. That's the name of Harold and Pattie. That's and it's going to be more about them, and it's going to be more about their world. So even if that's not the title, I think it'll be something more like that.
I like it. Mm-hmm. Looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Or Anna Karenina.
2. The reboot.
Personal.
Anna Karenina's.
Yeah. Anna Karenina's. The Carlyle. That's awesome. I'm so excited. I want everyone to read this book. I've read this book, obviously, From the Campaign Trail or Thereabouts. Available now on Amazon and anywhere you buy books on the internet. Also at weeklyhumoristshop.com. You can follow these two together on one duo Twitter account.
Yeah, it's like Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah.
It's Bleicher _ Newton. So BLEICHER.
And you can go to is it campaigntrailbook.com?
Yeah, campaigntrailbook.com.
Go to campaigntrailbook.com. Go to humoristbooks.com for more information on upcoming releases and more information on where to buy the book.
I should point out, too, if you're looking for something to read in your book club, Michael and I have personally written a book club packet available to download for free from campaigntrailbook.com.
And we will Skype into your book club.
Oh, yeah. We have very little to do. And
low standards.
We're very approachable.
Your book club is 3 people.
Yeah, we will Skype in and have a discussion with you about our book. We would absolutely.
And if it's in the New York City area, Andy will just come to your book club with a bottle of wine, and let's open this bottle. Let's open up a Riesling and chat about some politics.
I have a monthly Metro pass. I can
anywhere
no limit to
go anywhere in the 5 boroughs. Andy Newton will come to your book club and talk about this book
for sure. That's a promise.
I cannot wait. Well, thanks for being on. This is so much fun.
Yeah,
thanks for being on Talkward. Our sponsor
like being in your living room.
Our sponsor today is Cartoon Collections. For licensing cartoons, buying mugs, T-shirts, and all kinds of things. Cartoons from The New Yorker, from Esquire, Wall Street Journal, Barron's, and many others, including Weekly Humorist. Go to cartooncollections.com today. Thank you for our sponsor. Don't you love the Cartoon Collections, people?
They're amazing.
Amazing.
I love the Cartoon Collections.
I actually... my day job is a textbook editor.
Yeah.
And I worked on a history textbook and used, I think, what was the precursor to the Cartoon Collections back when
Cartoon Stock.
Cartoon Stock. I used them as a textbook editor to license cartoons for one of our history books.
Because they have all the cartoons. They have every cartoon. They have all the top cartoonists, and you can. It's a gigantic, ridiculous database. So if you need a cartoon for anything specific, you can check them out.
If you're looking to, for instance, looking for some political cartoons on the Bill Clinton impeachment. Which is what I was doing. Lots of options.
Lots of them?
Yeah.
So many.
Pretty hilarious cartoons, too. So
it's amazing how things have changed. Like the things that used to outrage us have changed so dramatically.
Oh my God.
From the Trump to the Obama, from the George W. Bush to the Clinton. Like the amount of outrage that like Obama got from that tan suit. Oh my God. Right?
Yeah, well, I was going to say the standards actually got higher under Obama because in the Clinton era, we had to have a debate about whether or not, getting a blowjob in the Oval Office was inappropriate. And then in Obama's administration, I remember an article where someone from the second Bush administration was saying it's outrageous that Obama sometimes doesn't wear his suit jacket in the Oval Office. If you can't do that, you're not ready to be president.
Horrible. Ridiculous.
Full stop.
Full stop.
Wonder how they would feel about, eating a Big Mac in the Oval Office.
Who knows?
Just masturbating onto Hope Hicks.
And with that, Michael Bleicher, Andy Newton, from the campaign trailer or thereabouts. Please get it today. Thanks for listening. I'm Marty Dundix, editor-in-chief of Weekly Humorist. Please follow us online at Weekly Humorist and subscribe to the newsletter at weeklyhumorist.com. This has been Talkward. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye. Bye, guys. Bye. That was fun. Thanks for doing that.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Talkward. Please subscribe, follow us, and visit weeklyhumorist.com.